Hey guys, it's me Skyly here today with a brand new video. Since today is National Women's Day, I thought that I would just do a sit down video where I just talk about feminism, my views on it, and why I think it's really important. So I feel that feminism has really strayed off from its initial beginning in the 60s, and the internet has a lot to blame for that. Someone can be reading something and misread it, read it the wrong way, and get offended by it, and then they would take a small issue that would be relatively unimportant and blow it way out of proportion. And so a problem like this that my friends always complain about are that people are really mad about there not being emojis that represent women in the work field. Well, on the other side of the world, you have girls younger than me being forced into marriages with men double their age, and this has caused a lot of people to degrade feminism and to view it as something very unimportant and very exclusive to people only in first world countries that are privileged. Fortunately, a lot of people are now beginning to identify as an intersectional feminist, where instead of just focusing on a single issue, they're focusing on a wide spectrum of problems and issues on a global scale that normally most people would be too afraid to talk about on their own. And I feel like this has led to a lot of people who don't feel like they have a voice in society to stand up for their beliefs and to come together for a greater good. And so, for example, I expected the women's marches back in January to be primarily hating against Trump and criticizing his new policies, but actually I was pretty surprised to find out that a lot of new range of issues were brought up, like police brutality, climate change, and disability rights. And people protest all the while tying these issues back into feminism and equality. So on another note, one thing that really gets me mad about people who identify as feminists but that don't really have much knowledge on it or its history and where it came from is when people preach about equality and how they believe equality is essential, but then when someone comes along that their views don't coincide with, they begin to criticize them. For example, people criticizing women who voted for Trump. As long as you have a reason to verify your beliefs, I think that people should accept and respect that everyone's views are going to be different and not everyone is going to agree with you. Because that's the reason that there's so much diversity in this world, is because no one has the same views and interests. And it's really hypocritical and blind because you have people who are preaching about equality and then suddenly making fun of being rude to people who don't have similar views to them. So feminism essentially began in the 1800s when Elizabeth Cady Stanton organized the first women's rights convention, which really was a kickstart for first wave feminism and women's rights suffrage. So instead of just protesting for their beliefs to be heard, there was actually a change made socially, politically, and economically. So in the early 1900s when women were allowed to vote. Second wave feminism began in the 1960s, definitely my favorite era ever. I love it so much, everything about the 60s. Amazing. It began when Betty Friedan wrote The Feminism Mystique. I think that this book inspired a lot of the housewife stereotype to become more independent. So next is third wave feminism, which is essentially nowadays modern women's rights. It began in the 90s and was a lot more inclusive than the earlier feminist waves because they were subject to mainly women that were upper class, middle-aged, and Caucasian. Feminists in this wave weren't afraid to speak their mind, especially in my favorite movement, Riot Grrrl, which was an underground punk movement, focusing on feminism in the music industry, particularly in the punk genre. Bands that were included in this movement are Suitor Kinney, Bratmobile, The Raincoats, Bikini Kill, La Tigre. That's all I can think of right now. Feminists began expressing themselves also through music, obviously, and also through art and writing, and especially through making zines about women's rights, gender inequality, etc. So with that said, that pretty much concludes my feminist video. I hope you guys learned something from this. And also, I just want to tell all of you guys, regardless of your gender, race, sexual identity, etc., each and every one of your voices deserves to be heard. If you feel like you're not being treated equally or that something needs to change, you can be the voice that'll help other people be inspired to stand up for what they believe in. If all of us just keep pushing for what we believe in, pushing for a greater good in the world, that we will make a change and we will be the change that we want to see in the world.